What's going on, guys? Jay here. Wanted to talk to you today about something I talked to you about a year ago. This guy, the Sega Genesis Mini. One of the mini consoles that are so popular nowadays. I wanted to take a look back now that it's been about a year since it released and take another look at the console and make sure it was something that was still worthwhile picking up. Make sure that my old review didn't lead you guys astray and make sure that this was something worth purchasing. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, and now, let's take another look at the Sega Genesis Mini.
So as we approach both the one-year anniversary of the release of the Sega Genesis Mini as well as the first year of our channel existing, I thought it'd be prudent to go back and look at the subject of our first really popular video, just in a slightly different light. 1 year after release, is the Genesis Mini still worth the price? Do I still see value in it being on my shelf? I want to run down a few basic elements of the machine before we get too far into things. This is one of the mega popular mini console emulators that comes preloaded with 42 classic Genesis titles and 3-button controller. The console is sculpted to be reminiscent of the Genesis 1 model machine released here in the States, with a tactile cartridge slot, an on and off toggle, a reset button, and a non-functional but still movable and awesome volume slider for the headphone jack. There's also removable ports on the bottom if you were lucky enough to get one of the Tower of Power add-ons that released in Japan. My favorite thing, though, is the inclusion of USB controllers. The biggest flaw of the NES and SNES classics were the proprietary ports for the controllers. Sega saw fit to use standard USB connectors, and even partnered with Retrobit to release an official 6-button controller, which works incredibly well. In fact, all of the gameplay captured in this video is going to be done using the Retrobit 6-button controller. There's some different settings you can access, most notably the ability to change the console language from English to Japanese, amongst others. This is notable because this will present your game box art in the Japanese releases rather than the American ones. It's a nice little touch. You're also able to change the background wallpaper that'll display behind the gameplay, either a Genesis-themed one, a grid, or just a total blackout. You can also add a CRT filter to your gameplay, but honestly it doesn't do a ton for me. I kind of prefer the crispness of the pixels in HD. The console typically sells for $80, but you can frequently find it on sale for $50 or less. This week, in fact, it's on sale for $49.99 at Target. As mentioned, there's 42 classic Genesis titles preloaded on the console with some stellar emulation, making this as close to a one-to-one experience as you can imagine. I do think there's a lot more good than bad on the machine. When you include games like Gunstar Heroes, Jammin Role, Sonic 2, and Virtua Fighter 2, you're already pretty far ahead of the curve. But now, let's run down the list of games so you can get a feel of what's in store. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle is a side-scrolling platformer that incorporates the paper, rock, scissors combat mechanic from the Master System games. I was never really big a fan of the Alex Kidd series. Yeah, sure, they were signature Sega games of the late 80s, but the games themselves never really did much for me. And playing this now, they still don't. It's an alright game, but when it released, I had already outgrown the target audience. And now at 41, I'm way past the intended player base. Alderd Base is a classic, and one I rented frequently as a kid. You're able to power up and transform from an already buff dude into an extra buff dude with energy hands and feet, and eventually into Wolfman. It's a better game in concept than in practice, looking back at it now, but there's still a ton of great memories involved here. It hasn't really aged like a fine wine, but it still plays shockingly well for a 30-plus-year-old game, and its design is kind of timeless. Go left to right, punch the monsters. It's kind of perfect in every way. Space Harrier 2 is a game I missed as a kid, and playing it today is kind of overwhelming. The backgrounds give me a bit of a slight headache, but the core gameplay here is chef's kiss. I'm really disappointed I'd never had this as a kid because this would have been in constant rotation for me. It is hard, but it's a ton of fun. Absolutely wonderful inclusion into this console. Ghouls and Ghosts and I have a love-hate relationship, kind of. Its uglier and more annoying sibling, Ghosts and Goblins for the NES, is one of my least favorite games ever. This one, though, this does everything right. The graphics are greatly improved, controls are tighter, and the game, while it's still brain-meltingly difficult, is significantly more forgiving than its jerk kid brother. I don't know how often I'd pick this out to play in a hey, Ghouls and Ghosts sounds great right now kind of way, but it's a solid inclusion. Now, Golden Axe is one of the signature games of my childhood. I almost always played as the dwarf and loved kicking the crap out of the little squirrel thieves and powering up my magic. This is kind of the flashpoint for Genesis, looking back at it. This is where people realize that it can be the beat-em-up console. This game ushered in so many great additions to that genre, including its sequels. While I'd have preferred to have Golden Axe 2 on here, the inclusion of Part 1 can't be knocked too much. It hasn't aged perfectly, but it's still a blast to play. Columns, what to say about Columns? I mean, it's a puzzle game, the puzzliest of puzzle games, and it's definitely one I think immediately of when someone mentions the Genesis. Unfortunately, I kind of hated the game as a kid, and I still hate it now. I don't know, I just don't dig the majority of the puzzle games, and Columns, unfortunately, just doesn't do anything for me. Now, Thunder Force 3 is a side-scrolling shooter, and as is the case with most of these types of games, I'm awful at it, which is kind of terrible because I absolutely adore side-scrolling shooters. This one is a really gorgeous entry onto the console, and it showed that it could push the limits of what the Genesis could really do early on in its lifespan. It's hard as hell, but the effects are amazing and the gameplay is solid. You can't ask for much more than that. Now, if you watched the video I helped on with the Game Dad channel a few weeks ago about the Disney Duck games, it should come as no shock that I have a deep affection for all things Disney. And this one's no different. Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse is a Sega-developed platformer starring everyone's favorite corporate mascot. This is just a pure and wonderful game. Incredible graphics, great animation sequences, and locomotion for Mickey and the enemies he faces, and fun gameplay mechanics. It's kind of the total package. Now, Strider might be one of those rare occasions where I actually prefer the 8-bit NES version to the 16-bit release. I don't know what it is about this game. I just feel completely disconnected from it. The controls are kind of clunky, the combat's kind of boring, and the wall climbing is pretty awful. I mean, it looks spectacular, don't get me wrong, but for my money, I'd rather play the NES version. Sonic the Hedgehog is an icon for a reason. This game was mind-blowing when I first saw it in the pages of EGM as a kid, and I begged my mom for a Genesis for Christmas. And the closer we got to the big day, the more of a fever pitch I entered to play it. Over a month before Christmas Day, my mom finally caved and gave me my Genesis early, and we spent hours that day engrossed in the blast processing power of the console. Sonic is as much responsible for my deep adoration of video games as Mario is, without question, and this game is one of the all-time greats. And as much as I loved Sonic, getting Toe Jammin Role is probably the game I think about first when I think about the Genesis console, aside from NHL 94. This was a game that blew my mind as a kid. The levels changed every time I played it. Music in video games could sound this cool. Oh my god, tomatoes and sneakers! I can drop off the world and go down a level. This is the game responsible for my continued love of roguelike games, and will always be one of my all-time favorites. Wonder Boy and Monster World is another solid platformer for the console, though it isn't one that I feel the need to really play all that often. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong. It's just one of those games where I don't have any nostalgia or deep connection to it. It's fun to play here, but it's a lower ranked one for me. I do love the Switch take on this game though, so maybe it's just a timing thing where I just didn't discover it at the right time. Still, it's a beautiful game with solid mechanics. It's just not for me. Now, Alecia Dragoon is... man, this is so close to really being a great game, but it's also so far away from being a great game at the same time. This is a game that is 100% a fantastic and spectacular idea on paper, and it gets so goddamn close in practice. It just doesn't quite cross the goal line. It's a side-scrolling platformer with magic powers and dragon helpers, but the game relies a bit too much on massive waves of enemies on screen to up the anxiety and anticipation of the levels. Now, it kind of shows off the power of the Genesis, which is great, but unfortunately, there's less focus on the design and actual good platforming experiences throughout the game. If it had been able to better balance those two things, this could have been an all-time great game. Kid Chameleon's alright. I rented it a few times as a kid, but it just, I don't know, it didn't connect for me. The main problem with the game is it just isn't memorable. I play it and it almost immediately goes out of my brain. There's nothing to it that really makes it unique. I mean, you get some costumes that are essentially the power-ups from Super Mario Bros. 3, and you go around various average design levels. I mean, it's decent, it's just not memorable. Now, Super Fantasy Zone is a cute-em-up and a ton of fun. It's the rare side-scrolling shooter where you can go in either direction, and your job is to take down flower motherships. Along the way, you can enter a store and buy some power-ups that work for a limited series of uses, and then there's a boss fight. It's as simple as can be, and it's really fun. It's not something I want to play over and over, but every once in a while, it's just what the doctor ordered. Take everything Sonic 1 did well, improve on it, and you've got Sonic 2. Better graphics, better sound, more memorable levels, and Tails. This game is fast, frantic, and fun, and it's as close to perfect Sonic game as you're going to get. The right balance of difficulty, speed, and Sonic BS, thank you Scott the Woz for putting that phrase into words, Sonic 2 is an improvement in nearly every way over the original. I do hate Echo the Dolphin though, straight up, not gonna lie to you, it's just not fun. I don't know what to do and I don't like it, which is a shame because it's gorgeous. It's just not something I've ever liked or ever will like. I've tried it numerous times, it just doesn't click. Road Rash 2 I've spoken about in previous videos, and again, it's a fun vehicular combat game that puts you behind the handlebars of a motorcycle racing down the highway. You beat the hell out of your fellow drivers, steal their weapons, and drive for victory. It's a fantastic game, and honestly I'm kind of shocked that it's included on this list. Who knew that EA even remembered they owned the IP? Streets of Rage 2 is the yardstick by which you should measure how good a beat-em-up is. A big cast of characters to choose from, great graphics, awesome music, weapons galore, mailbox chicken, and a balance of both difficulty and fun. This is the total package, and one that everyone should play, regardless of whether or not you love beat-em-ups. This is one of my favorite inclusions on this machine. And the only thing that would have made it better would have been if we got Streets of Rage and Streets of Rage 3 on here as well. World of Illusion is awesome. It improves in almost every way from Castle of Illusion by doing the smart thing and including Donald Duck. Graphically, the game is a step up from the original release, and almost everything is better. Your sound quality's up, enemies are awesome, and the stage design is improved. About the only thing I don't like is the attack mechanic. That changed for some reason. I just don't really dig it. I preferred Castle of Illusions, but this one's fine. Shining Force is a rare release. It's an RPG on the Genesis. This game sees you form a team and explore the world to defeat the Runefaust invasion. Clever combat harkens to the Ultima series with some great quasi-cutscenes whenever enemies and your characters engage in battle. Graphically, it looks great, and there's a ton of characters recruit and use, and the game is a fantastic conclusion on this machine. RPGs were rare on the Genesis, but the ones that did release, most of the time, were really good. Alright, next up is one of the greatest games ever. Flat out, period, ever. End of story on any console ever. Gunstar Heroes is just magnificent. Huge over-the-top explosions, constant chaos on the screen, gorgeous graphics, and some of the best sound ever released on a cartridge. This game is magnificent, and with it going for a considerable price on the secondary market, getting it here to play for a pittance of the cost is a no-brainer. Seriously, if you've never played this before, you owe it to yourself to pick up the console to be able to play Gunstar Heroes. I've never been much a fan of the Shinobi series, and Shinobi 3 doesn't really change that. That's not to imply it isn't good, it is. It plays fine, it looks good. It doesn't do anything poorly, it's just not a series I enjoy or have any attraction to. You're a master ninja, and the game is a side-scrolling shooter platformer. You throw shurikens and defeat enemies. And it does everything adequately well, it's just nothing exceptional about it in my eyes. Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition is... it's Street Fighter II. I mean, this has 6-button controller support, which is awesome, and I strongly suggest you use the 6-button controller for this game. All the classic characters are here, and it's Street Fighter II. You know the game, and if you don't by now, you should probably find out. If you like Street Fighter II, like I do, you'll love this inclusion. If you don't, you won't. There's not much to it other than that. Landstalker, I think, possesses the longest intro in the history of the Genesis. Seriously, it takes forever to get to the point where you're actually playing. And by the time you're there, you have a thoroughly average game with an isometric view. I mean, it looks good, but gameplay-wise, there's just not much here in my eyes. I know a lot of folks dig this game, but this just doesn't do anything for me. I wish it did, because I like the idea of kind of like a fantasy Indiana Jones treasure hunt game, but yeah, I don't know, this one just doesn't work for me. Sonic Spinball, Alright, now, straight up, I really like Sonic Spinball, but that's acknowledging the fact that it's not a very good game. I mean, it's a pinball game at its core, but it's really slow. The controls are kind of iffy. It doesn't really play all that great, but I mean, it looks good and it sounds good, and I still have fun with it for some reason, so I'm kind of happy it's here. Alright, so remember everything I said previously about columns about hating puzzle games? Ignore that with Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. I love this game. I don't know why, but I love it, despite being absolutely terrible at it. I mean, it's just Puyo Puyo, but it's so damn good. Not much to say other than that. If you love Puyo Puyo, you'll love this game. Alright, straight up, I suck out loud at Eternal Champions, and I wish I didn't. I mean, this game is gorgeous. It's fast and a big fighting game. I mean, the character sprites are massive, with amazing animations, great attacks. I'm just awful at it, and I like fighting games. This one just doesn't click for me. I wish I didn't suck at it, and I wish I knew how to play it well, because I love the character and stage designs. And despite being awful at it, I love it. It's a ton of fun to play if you're a fighting game fan. This next one's interesting. As a Castlevania fan, I feel obligated to like this, and, you know, true enough, I do. But if I'm being honest, I don't like it nearly as much as I like Super Castlevania 4 for the SNES. Still, it's a solid game, and it's a great revisit to a wonderful franchise. It plays to the strengths of the Genesis. It looks amazing, the controls are solid, which you'd expect from a Castlevania game, and everything just plays well. It's just not Super Castlevania 4. Now, I'm of two minds on Contra Hardcore. It doesn't really feel like a Contra game to me, but at the same time, I can see the DNA of the series at play. I think, and you'll actually discover this later on in a video where I go over some of the other Contra games, what it really boils down to is that, honestly, I'm not as big a fan of the Contra series as I thought it was. Which is probably why I enjoy this one so much, because it just feels different enough to be something I really dig. It's a solid game. It's appropriately difficult with some massive explosions and effects. Tons of fun. This one's hard. I love so much about Earthworm Jim. It's visually stunning, it sounds incredible, and the mechanics are on point. I just don't have any fun with it. I keep thinking that it's something I'm missing, that maybe if I just try it again, it'll finally click. But I think I have to admit that after 30 years, Earthworm Jim and I are just not destined to be friends. That's okay. It's just not for me. Dynamite Heady is weird. But it's a treasure game, so there's no real surprise there. I mean, it's a run-and-gun platformer, which you'd expect, and it looks incredible, which, again, you'd expect. It's just really flippin' odd. You throw your head to attack, and you can collect different power-ups that'll change your head into different things. A vacuum cleaner, a pig that shoots stars, a bomb. There's a ton of power-ups. And as weird as it is, it plays brilliantly. I mean, again, it's a treasure game, so there's no surprise here. My favorite inclusion on the list is Mega Man The Wily Wars. I had no idea this even existed until I was an adult, and to be able to play it here for no secondary market cost makes me so happy. This is a beautiful remaster of Mega Man's 1 through 3. Think Super Mario All-Stars level, and they play brilliantly. The audio's cleaned up, graphics look amazing, and the gameplay is solid. If you're a Mega Man diehard like I am, this is worth the cost of the console alone. Another RPG and another incredible inclusion, Phantasy Star 4 is part of the continuing Phantasy Star console series of epic RPGs. It's a classic turn-based JRPG with huge monsters and world-spanning quests to pursue and complete. Rife with mysterious villains and memorable characters, Phantasy Star 4 looks and plays great. While it's not my favorite from the series, I would have preferred Phantasy Star 2. It's still a welcome inclusion. Beyond Oasis is frequently referred to as the Genesis' Zelda, and I can see why. As Prince Ali, you're on a world-spanning swashbuckling quest in a top-down action RPG where you hack and slash and use items to defeat your enemies. Don't get me wrong, it's a good game, but it's a bit unfair to compare it to Zelda. It never quite gets there. Still, it's a solid game. It's a lot of fun. I'm really not sure what to think about Light Crusader. It's a good-looking isometric action RPG from Treasure, so I'm kind of predisposed to loving it, but I'm just having a hard time doing so. It's kind of plodding and dull despite its development pedigree. I wish this grabbed me more than it does. I need to give it some more time, but it's just not something I'm digging so far. The game with the most style easily goes to Comic Zone. This is an absolutely incredible game, which you've seen me talk about in the Genesis Games That Define Me video. If you could take what makes a comic book great, distill it down into brilliant visual style and animation sequence, and layer it with classic beat-em-up action, you'd have this one. It's difficult and fun and perfect in nearly every way. Vector Man is an interesting inclusion because it's less a game of substance and one definitely that feels like a showcase for a rendering engine. I mean, it's a shooter platformer, and what it does adequately well. It's just nothing special. It looks good and it plays okay, it's just nothing to write home about. I'd completely forgotten about the Virtua Fighter series for years, and getting Virtua Fighter 2 on this collection is awesome. It's definitely showing its age. It's pretty slow, but the bones here are solid, and you can really see the groundwork being laid for the future of the series. A great cast of characters, fun mechanics, and solid fighting style make this one of the surprise hits on the collection. I love that we got Monster World 4 included in this collection. It's a gorgeous action platformer with RPG elements. The game just plays brilliantly well, and it flexes the muscles of what the Genesis was capable of. As Asha, you run through the world, slaying enemies and collecting coins to upgrade your gear. It's as basic as can be, and sometimes that's what you need. This game doesn't overcomplicate things, it just delivers on its pedigree. Darius. Oh, Darius. This is one of the 2 bonus games released on the Genesis Mini. An incredible port of an arcade shooter from 1986, Darius plays just so well. Incredible level design, awesome power-ups, and gorgeous visuals make this a true joy to play, and an absolutely wonderful bonus to get. And finally, we have Tetris. And Tetris is... it's Tetris. I mean, it does everything fine, and it plays exactly how you'd expect Tetris to play. It's just not as memorable an experience as the one for the Game Boy or the NES. Still, I mean, this is a super cool inclusion, since this is one of the games that was lost to the time of legal battles of the past.
All right, so straight up, yeah, do I think it's worth the price? Absolutely, this thing is worth the price. This is one of the best, if not the best mini consoles out. Full disclosure, I don't own the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, so I cannot weigh it against that. I can only weigh it against the PlayStation Classic, the NES Mini, and the SNES Mini. And I do think that this is probably the best one. If you're into modding, the modding community is starting to get a hold of this and really starting to make some strides where you're able to add ROMs onto the console, and that's pretty awesome. This one is still stock, though. I didn't want to alter it. I really like the way it is. You know, something like this that has all kinds of tactile stuff, like, you know, the volume that goes up and down, the reset button, the power, and then, of course, the cart there, that where the slot where the cart goes, is pretty cool. You know, one of the things I really like about this is the selection of games that's on here, and the fact that if you switch between English and Japanese, you see not only the English box art, but also the Japanese box art, which is pretty awesome. I do like that there's 3-button support as well as 6-button support. They really were forward-thinking on this. This is a very, very well-designed and well-done console. And nowadays, when you can find it on sale, like for the picture I showed you at Target for $50, this is a steal. This is a phenomenal piece of hardware to have in your collection. Is it something I play every day? No, it's definitely not something I play every day. I do kind of devote my time to the PS4, the Switch, and the Xbox One, but this is something I go back to probably once or twice a week and just pick up some time on Comic Zone, or I hop in on Gunstar Heroes or something like that. It's a great console. It's definitely worth the price of admission. If you guys own a Sega Genesis Mini, let me know in the comments down below what you think of it 1 year on from release. Let me know if you still think that it was worth the price of admission. I certainly do. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel and you have watched this far, please consider subscribing. We'd love to have you here. We're uploading at least 2 videos a week. Guys, I do appreciate everything you guys do for the channel. It just means the world to me that you are willing to subscribe, to comment, to like, and to share the videos with your friends to spread the love. It just, honestly, it kind of blows my mind that I ever broke 10 subscribers, and to be north of 120 now is just, it's amazing to me. It truly is. We're making that push towards 200, and I love it. It's just a fun ride to be on, and I'm so happy you guys are here. Until next time, guys, I have been Jay. Play more games, and stay square. We'll talk to you soon.